All right, today we have another really interesting success story. We have Heather here, who her and I were kind of going back on and forth on how to define her success story, and ultimately kind of settled on this like really interesting medium between, like, if you have a military breakup that occurs where your boyfriend or girlfriend is going overseas and they break up with you right before, or if they're going to study abroad and they break up with you right before, if there's any kind of forced departure, this is the success story to listen to. So I'd love to introduce you to Heather, who is going to take us through her entire situation. How you doing, Heather?
I'm doing great. Nice to be here.
All right, so let's go hop in the time machine, start back from the beginning. How does this breakup occur? What goes on here?
So yeah, my breakup happened almost 2 years ago. It was back in March 2020, which is a very familiar date for a lot of people. So
It's uncanny how many breakups came into our Facebook
yeah,
group around March of 2020.
March 2020. But this happened before
COVID.
the big event, before COVID. So
Okay.
my boyfriend was getting set up to deploy overseas. And I will admit that things had become a little bit strained before, not in a argumentative way or anything like that, but definitely I started to have insecurities in the relationship, and I think I was projecting that a little bit. But it was still a very good relationship, and he was very loving, and clearly still in love with me. And I'd gone down to his place, his parents' place. He invited me down to his parents' place that weekend, and then on the way home, I got back home, and that's when he let me know that he just didn't see it working. This was after being together for 2 years, so I was completely floored. And he was also leaving for overseas in less than a week, so it was a week before his deployment. So while it had been like not as good as relationship had been before, it was still a very big 360. So I was really surprised.
So you basically, does this like happen on the car ride coming back from visiting the parents?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's like there's nowhere to escape to. He's got you.
yeah.
Who's driving the car?
Me.
I mean, there's a time when you break up with someone, maybe not when they're driving a car though, you know?
I think that's when he got the courage. I think because it was a long drive, so I think he got the courage to do it. I clearly had been on his mind, um, and that
Did
might
you?
be why there had been a bit of distance that I've been sensing.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you noticed like, so you visit his parents, right? You're both
Mhm.
there to visit the parents. Do you notice like anything during that trip that makes you feel like something's off?
I noticed it before, but actually during the trip, he was more touchy feely than he had been in a long time, like wanting to hold me a lot. But I now know that that was probably him, like last chance to hold her kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's really interesting how that kind of works. So what was like his reasoning? Like this breakup talk happens while you're driving a car, which is dangerous, you know? Like if you cry, you're not paying attention to there's all sorts of things that can go wrong, but what does he say?
I did cry, by the way. I pulled over. I pulled over.
Okay, thank goodness.
He just, that classic thing that he just didn't see this being a forever thing at this point anymore. He just didn't see a future. He didn't know how there could be a future, and that it had, he hadn't for a little bit. And no matter what I said, like obviously I was in an emotional state, but I was very devastated. But that was his reasoning. But neither of us could really talk about it anymore at that point because I was crying. Uh, but we talked about it more the next day. Is
Okay.
when the big
What
conversation happened.
what was the living situation? Did you guys live together
No,
at
no,
that point? So you lived separately. You just went on this trip together to his parents' house. On the way
yeah,
back from the trip, he breaks the news.
yeah.
Um, like at, sorry, this is a weird question to ask, but I am just naturally curious. I've never heard of a breakup happen this way. So so you're in the car. Like, does he do it like 25% into the drive home? Or does he do it like
Near the
right
end.
as you? Okay. So
Near
there's
the
not
end.
that awkwardness like we still have 2 hours to go
No.
together. Okay. So his reasoning basically is like, I don't see this being a forever thing, which almost implies to me that he feels pressure like for a next step. I
Yes.
don't know you. So you mentioned in your Facebook post when you kind of posted the success story a few months ago that you were not the one to pressure him. It was actually maybe the other outside extra forces that were
Yeah.
culminating. Do you feel like that had a huge impact on his decision?
I would say so. Like definitely his parents were really, really keen on
They
me
want those
and
grandbabies, you know?
oh, it came up a lot.
I
So
know. I've been in that
um
situation too.
but I mean, definitely he knew that that's what I wanted. I never pressured him, but he knew that, and we had talked about it. That's the thing he brought up in the past when we leave to live together, when we have kids. This is what our kids' names will be. So this is all conversation we've had, but I definitely never pressured it. I didn't pressure him to move in, but and he actually did talk about that the next day, was that we were moving towards that direction. And I personally think he got a little bit scared,
Scared.
like let's put the brakes on. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I didn't necessarily pressure him. I never gave him ultimatum. I was very happy in the situation we were at. But he definitely was feeling the pressure from his family, and he did mention that.
Yeah. I mean, so the only really experience I've ever had to draw on is when I, I was going to move in with my wife before we were married and we started looking at apartments. Cause to me, it's like this nice thing to say and kind of fantasize about, but until you're actually there and experiencing it, you're like, oh, this is like this is a real thing. This is going to happen. And it kind of freaks you out a little bit. So I'm wondering if maybe that kind of occurred. But obviously there's more to the story because you have this X factor of him leaving on this departure
Yes.
to go overseas. So how did that factor in?
What I knew at the time or what I know now.
Let's
uh,
go. Let's go with hindsight. Now, what you know now.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there was, honestly, I think he thought he was going to be very sad missing me, and he didn't deal with emotions like that very well. And I think, judging on some conversations we'd had, even coming up to that point, that it was easier and less painful for him to do a breakup than to
Mhm.
spend 6 months missing me.
Yeah, it's fascinating how many people have that black and white mentality, which
Yeah.
is like, kind of the mature things to do is like, okay, I've got her back home and it'll suck, but she'll be there. Instead, you're saying he's basically like, no, it's easier for me to just break up with her and not have to think about it anymore.
Yeah. And also, I mean, there was, again, still that distance that had happened. Like he had been pulling
Right.
away for several months, and the more he pulled away, the more insecure I became, and the more subservient I became, which I think just fed into like a little vicious cycle.
Now, you mentioned that you became insecure and subservient. What are some examples of how that manifested in the relationship?
Oh, everything. I would be like, oh, what do you want to do this weekend, or where do you want to eat? Or it was never
So
me giving
he
suggestions, because I
got
was
it.
trying so hard to please him at that point, which was never our relationship before. But I was trying so hard to make his experience with me be positive. It was always trying to please him.
And it's funny how that like that fear that you have of losing him kind of manifests itself and in an odd way it causes you to lose him.
Yeah.
Um okay. So, let's get to the actual stuff that you did that worked here. So he goes overseas. You're broken up. You've obviously been through the all of the emotions, the grief and everything
Yeah.
like that. What is your first step?
Actually, can I fast track back for a second? So
Fast
the day,
track back. Yes.
so the day after the breakup, we did talk as well. And this time, I spent the whole night kind of saying, no, I'm gonna put emotions aside. I'm gonna be super logical about this. And I actually had a very logical talk with him. I said, well, would you like a break, or would you like to see other people, or let's talk about this rush. You think you might maybe we take a break while you're deployed. When you come back, let's reconsider. And the more I gave suggestions, the more he dug in. So
Mm.
I did do the logical emotionalist thing, and strangely enough, he got emotional during that. So, but
That's
I did try. I did try to be logical. It didn't work.
okay. Well, so that's interesting because when you kind of approach what woman, no, like seriously, what woman offers up like, well, would you like to date other people after that? So I mean that would throw me for a loop, and it's like no. Um, But if you really think about it, you want to get meta about it. That's like what the true secure woman would do. She would have enough confidence to be like, yeah, find that other woman. She's not going to compare to me.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, go out there, see what you think
Right.
you're
I love
missing,
it.
and then when you come back.
Well, okay. So now that you had the logical conversation,
Didn't work.
it didn't work. He dug in,
Yeah, dug in
then he
hard.
leaves.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So I was devastated for a good week after that. I told very few people that this has happened. And then a week later is when COVID hit hard. So not only was I not telling people, but then suddenly we were going to work. I wasn't allowed to see my friends. So for a long time, nobody knew that this breakout had happened. They just assumed he's deployed and I'm at home because that I
And
was actually
if
home
they
because I
sense
was,
you're sad because he's deployed.
yeah. Well, they couldn't sense I was sad because I had excuse not to go anywhere. I had an excuse not to see anybody.
Okay.
I was at home with COVID. Um, but at the same time, I didn't have anyone to talk to. And that's when I started to be a little bit more proactive because now I'm stuck at home. All I can think about this. I have no escape. So instead of being sad, I said, what can I do about this? And that's when I started doing the online search about, all right, is there any kind of breakup program? And that's how I learned about no contact. And I did admit in the Facebook group, yours was not the first program I found.
Shame
Uh,
on you.
but I learned about no contact, and I started doing 21 days was this program. It was always 21 days. It's all you do. And so I started doing the 21-day no contact, but I was very scared because he was deployed, and I've been with him when he's been deployed before. You military men really tend to compartmentalize. So when they're there, they're there. When they're home, they're home. And I wasn't quite sure how much effect no contact was going to have on someone over there. And I do think it didn't have as much effect at the time.
No, that's
I
fascinating.
really do believe
Yeah.
that. And I know that from kind of what happened when he came back. But I was doing the 21 days, no contact. And then during that time, I wasn't quite getting the support I wanted from other coaches. It would have been too expensive to have a coach on call every day.
Shame on you for going to those other coaches.
I know. And that's when I found I can't remember. I think it was your website I found. And
Probably.
yeah, and it was the Facebook group. And I instantly appealed to me because I thought, well, this is great. There's moderators there. They'll be able to answer my silly questions. And then there's other people going through the same situation as me. And again, I hadn't told anyone. So it was almost like actually, I know what it was. I was scared if I told people, it would be real. So it was just,
Okay.
if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get him back. I don't want people to know because I need to do this. So the Facebook group gave me a place to talk to people about it and about the issues I was having, and also have a moderator there who could answer my silly questions. And then I would get a coach for like the big phases. And that's kind of my plan of action. And that
And
gave
then you
me
coached with Anna,
yeah,
obviously.
I did, yeah.
And Anna said what to you specifically about fearful avoidance?
So I talked about everything that had happened, and I think I hadn't even done introducing the situation. She's like, yeah, he's a fearful avoidant, which she has personal experience with. And she warned me right off the bat that of all the kinds I could get, this guy is going to take, she said minimum a year and she was right, by the way.
I'm telling you, it's hard to hear. Anyone who's listening to this that thinks they have a fearful avoidant, there will be a part of you that says that can't be right. Heather, it's right. It takes longer. It takes longer. Well, I think in your case, it's going to take a little bit extra longer too, because you have the military aspect of him being overseas. You can't really do too much.
Yeah. But even so, even counting that 6 months out of there, it took basically a year.
It takes a while. Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, like the average success story is going to happen between 3 and 7 months. Fearful avoidance take longer naturally. So, I mean, but that's with normal situations, like you had one of the arguably the hardest situations that you could have. But I think it's a testament to how smart and amazing you are that it worked out really well. So let's figure out, what did you do that was smart and amazing? Obviously something went right.
I took Anna's advice to begin with. So I did.
First step she took, people, is she bought coaching. No, I'm just kidding.
I did.
All right, go
It's true.
ahead.
It's true though. It gave me a plan of action, which is for me, I needed a plan. So I had a general plan, but I needed specific. I knew the no contact was coming up, and I was freaking out, to be honest. That the no contact, it's funny, so many people have issues with no contact, like in the Facebook group. It's the hardest thing. I did not find that the hardest thing. That was my regrouping time. The hardest thing for me was when the texting phase started. And it terrified me before, and I was right to be terrified for me. And with Anna, she gave me a really like, okay, this is what you're going to do. But because he was a fearful avoidant, it wasn't quite the regular texting program. It had to be a bit longer. So if there was a no response or anything like that, I had to give it more time than a regular person would.
When
which
they
is
pull back, you pull back. Yep.
Yeah, and that was hard. That was really hard. But I did it, and he was very polite. Anytime I wrote it to him, super polite, super quick. I never once got a no response, but he never engaged, and he never furthered the conversation. It was always very difficult. It was like dragging stuff out. And I couldn't, even on his favorite things, I could not get him engaged while he was deployed. I'm going to caveat that, while he was deployed.
Well, I think that really harkens back to that compartmentalization that you were mentioning. So how long is he deployed? So I'm going to go on a limb here and say you didn't see any serious success until after he got back from deployment.
100%. Yeah, it was completely neutral, low positive, consistently the exact same thing for the entire time he's deployed. Didn't matter if I gave him 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever. It was the same until he came home. And that's when things started to change.
So I'm actually going to ask you a series of questions here that maybe seem like they're off topic, but I think they're super relevant to anyone who's in this situation. How did you cope with that? Because he's going to be, how long was he deployed for? Like 6 months, you said?
6 months, yeah.
All right. So he's deployed for 6 months. Nothing major happens in those 6 months. So it feels like you're a little bit like a hamster on a wheel, just doing the same thing over and getting the same results. How do you cope with that emotionally, internally, to get through that period of time?
It was tough for me, especially because I'm seeing on the board people having success after 3 months, 4 months, some a few weeks. And I was, what am I doing wrong that they're doing right? And maybe he really doesn't want to come back. But at the same time, I also knew about military guys being very compartmentalized when they're deployed. So I had a little bit of faith. Let's just see what happens when he gets back. So that's what I kept telling myself. We'll just wait. We'll see.
Okay. So that served as your North Star to like, okay, I'll make my ultimate decision on whether I need to just like find someone new or continue doing this once he gets back, and we'll see then.
Yeah.
So he gets back.
So he gets back, and initially it is the same where he's, and I knew he was back, and that hurt a lot when I knew he was back.
Oh, and he didn't say anything?
He didn't say anything, and he didn't come to see me. I don't know, in my mind, you put these little fantasies. Oh, he's going to change his mind. He'll come running back. And he didn't say anything. And it hurt. So that hurt more. I was saying it hurt just as much as the breakup had. And I would still do a little reach outs. I get that same polite response, but nothing major. And then what changed was I got a message from his best friend who knew I was going to be in a nearby city and said, "Oh, hey, let's go hang out for the day. And we're going to have this, fun thing." And I'm like, okay. I mean, we'd been friends before, but we weren't super close. But I was thinking, oh, this is the way to get to his inner circle. So I'm going to do it.
Sphere of influence. I got it.
Sphere of influence. I got this. And also kind of get some insider information of what's going on. But what ended up happening was at the end of the day, his best friend admitted to me that the real reason he'd asked me to meet up was that my ex had been very sad since he'd come back, not while he was away, but since he'd come back. And he was worried about him. And he was wondering if I would consider taking him back, which was funny because I was the one who got broken up with, but it turned out everyone thought that I'd broken up with him.
So he really compartmentalized to the point where it's almost like his friends didn't even realize. They knew the breakup went down, but they didn't realize the exact circumstances around that.
So the good news of this, it gave me some renewed hope. The bad news of it is that it it almost made me forget that he is a fearful avoidant. So I did kind of want to rush ahead a bit, which I can kind of warn about later. It doesn't work. Uh, but yeah, so we concocted this plan that we were going to go camping, and like I would arrange it, and then I'd put out the feeler and invite him and see if he wants to come. And he immediately responded, absolutely, this sounds great, let's go do this. And it was the most response I'd gotten from him since he'd left. And so again, in my mind, I'm thinking, this is great. I know he misses me. I know he's sad. He's going to want me as soon as he sees it. This didn't happen, by the way. But the camping trip did happen, and he was so communicative for the few weeks leading up to the camping trip. It felt amazing. But then when we got there, we were on pleasant terms. It was great, but we
He's
didn't
afraid
get
to
back
make a move. You're afraid to make a
yeah,
move. You're in this
exactly.
stalemate. No one knows what to do.
Yeah, but I
So
also
did
now,
anything interesting happen at all during the camping trip, or was it literally like you're afraid to do something, he's afraid to do something, so you just sort of live in that place?
I don't know. I don't think he would have been in the right space yet to make a move, because I don't think he knew
Okay.
what he wanted at that point. But I was definitely afraid to make a move, and I think I went a little bit meek again. I don't
Okay.
think it held me back, but it definitely, I because the longer the weekend went, the more surprised I was that it wasn't progressing. And then
And it
it
has
was
to be
over.
frustrating on a level too, because you know he likes you. You know, his friend basically told you as much, but like you're not getting that like
Yeah,
immediate reaction from him.
yeah. And to be fair, this was self-doubt. Is it that he misses me, or is he just misses having someone and he was done with me?
Right.
Like I didn't know. Like he started to have this self-doubt again, but it didn't change as much as I thought it would. But what did happen, the benefit of this trip, was that it opened up the communication floodgates. So now I could text him and actually get communications. And this is when I started to do the real texting phase, so to speak, the way that it's meant to be done, and doing like the push and pull. And I was able to do it properly this time. So
Okay.
that was the camping trip allowed me to do that. And I want to point out to everyone listening, it was not a solo camping trip. It was with a group. So
Okay.
there was a bit of
So
safety net there.
okay. So you mentioned you do kind of get back into the texting phase here. You start seeing some positive feedback from that. How quickly do things progress at this point?
Um, Not quickly. I
Okay.
would say we kind of went the push pull thing, and there was a few times where I had to go like 2 weeks mini no contact. I had to do a few mini no contacts and a few more coaching sessions with Anna, and then the next kind of big breakthrough was Thanksgiving. So I guess a
2020.
year, yeah,
Thanksgiving
almost,
2020 almost. Yeah.
yeah, Thanksgiving 2020, and I couldn't go home because of COVID, and he couldn't go home because of COVID. And so I just, it was a just crazy idea. I was like, you know what, I'm going to invite him over and we'll see what happens. And he said yes. So I was like, great. So he came down for the weekend for Thanksgiving, and I ordered. I didn't make it. I'm not gonna lie. I ordered a Thanksgiving meal,
Those are the
and we
best.
had it, and
Did
nothing
you, but
happened.
did you say you made it to him?
No, he knew.
Oh,
We're
that's
not big enough.
unfortunate. You'd be like,
But it
yeah,
was
look, I made
fun.
this. Okay.
Right?
So nothing happens.
Nothing. No, I mean it was fun. It was enjoyable. We hung out. We watched TV. We ate. It was really really nice. We sat on the couch
But no,
side by
no,
side.
like no holding hands,
Nope.
no kissing, nothing like
Nope.
that.
Nope. No.
It's
But
like
there wasn't
it's
there
like
wasn't tension.
teenagers, like no one knows
No.
how to make that first move.
But it wasn't. There wasn't tension this time. It wasn't like what's going on in head. We just enjoyed each other's company,
Okay.
and I thought this is great. Like he's
Yeah.
remembering how great we are together. And yes, he did, but it didn't have me not knowing how these things work. Didn't realize that this would cause the opposite reaction. And when he went home, I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks.
Okay, he got really scared because it's getting
Yeah,
real at that point. Like,
yeah,
like you're physically there, and while maybe nothing romantic technically happened, sometimes emotional intimacy is just as powerful as physical intimacy. And I'm assuming like you're opening up, and he's opening
yeah.
up and becoming vulnerable. That could be scary for a fearful avoidant.
It is, but I will say, once he did reach back to me, he admitted that. He goes, he goes, sorry, I haven't been communicating. It's just that I really enjoyed spending the weekend with you. And I went home and I just was sad that it didn't continue. So that was kind of like his first emotional slip up.
Okay.
Slip up. It's not a game, but slip up. He slipped up.
Yes.
Yes. But we still were together. And then we kind of went back, still that texting, push and pull. This is a long process with these guys.
Texting phase here is lasting a lot longer than the average success story. But
oh yeah.
But fearful avoidance are different than regular avoidance.
Yeah. And then kind of a similar situation happened at Christmas, except this time I went back to his. Oh, actually, this one's even better. He invited me again to his parents' house for Christmas.
It's literally like, go back to the scene of the crime,
I
know?
But again, we didn't get back together. It was.
But is anything progressing like physically at this point? Kissing, hand holding, anything like that? Or is it still, he's still a little too afraid to do things like that?
During Christmas, yes, but it was kind of like while we were at his parents during Christmas, is like we were playing make believe that we were boyfriend and girlfriend again, but we both knew it wasn't real. If that makes sense.
It does, actually, because do you think that, okay, so this is kind of a weird question to ask, but I do think with this guy, it's definitely worth asking. Do you think that pressure, to me, he seems like he really cares about what his parents think. Like that seems to be a huge thing. Do you think the pressure of having to see them and bring you there, like add to that dynamic at all? Like the fakeness dynamic, like you're together, but not really together,
It's very possible. I guess the way I referred to it at the time, and this is why it didn't freak me out, was it was his try before you buy. It was kind of
okay.
like, let's see how this feels.
A great term. Okay.
But I think he just needed to see how it felt for him to be dated, because he's clearly scared to go back into this phase. And I think he needed to know, is this like, because he's a type of person, fearful avoidant, that when they jump him, they're all in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it took him so long. But I want to be clear, we did not get back together at Christmas.
Okay. Holiday was not what pushed him over the edge.
No.
But you became, so you kissed her, so you do make some progress in that realm, but you're not together yet.
Yeah, physical got crossed. So that was like the first time that it happened. But it didn't mean we were back together when we got home.
Okay.
And he did the same thing he did at Thanksgiving, where he pulled back again. Yeah.
2 weeks. Well, at least he's predictable at this point. Yes. You know exactly what's going on.
Yes, but at this time it was quite devastating. And I had another one-on-one with Anna, and during Christmas break, I think it was, and she was like, "This is it. You success story. This is great." And then it didn't happen, and he pulled back really, really hard, to the point where my birthday was a few weeks later, and I got like,
well, okay, then maybe that crossing that physical barrier, like I think like maybe the first time he pulled back, you have that emotional barrier that's crossed. He pulls back and freaks him out. But above the emotional barrier to him maybe is the physical barrier, and that begins to get crossed, and he really maybe pulls back, and it's like, I got to think about this. Do you think that's what happened?
I think so. But I will say, so when I talked to Anna at this point, by this point, by the way, it had been almost a year.
Yeah.
And Anna sat me down and she said, she goes, I was so sure that what you had back in December was it. And she goes, I gotta be real. Yeah.
I don't know if I told you that. She said, like, I have a real, like, I got one fearful avoidant success story. It's happening. And then I didn't hear anything from her.
No, so I had another coaching session with her. Like after 3 weeks, I panicked. I had another session with her, and she said, I've got to be honest. You have to accept that this might not happen, which was so hard for me to hear after all this time. And she just said, like, you tried your best, but you can continue. And she says, there's a possibility, but you have to be realistic that this might not happen at this point, because you've tried everything.
Yeah, you don't want to waste your time on a situation too that can become untenable no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not how it worked out.
No, it's not that. And to she wasn't saying it wasn't going to work out, but she was being really realistic at this point.
She's trying to protect you so that you're not you don't go all in on someone that's going to break your heart. You know, that's not what we want. We want that transformation where you're kind of
Yeah.
like, you know what, I can find someone just as good.
Yeah. I I decided, I told her this at the time. I said, it's COVID right now. And while I had started dating again, and I did, for the clear, I did the whole Trinity thing,
Okay.
work. I renovated my house. I got promoted. I
Good
did
for
all the stuff.
you.
I was dating. But at the same time, it was still COVID. So it wasn't like I was really meeting a lot of new people. And I thought, you know what, I'm got nothing going on for the next few months until this COVID thing starts down, because it was a second wave happening. So I'll give him to the end of this, and we'll see how it progresses. But I'm not done yet. I still think there's hope, but we'll see. So she gave me a new plan. And again, back to that whole texting push pull. I went back to that
Mhm.
phase so many times. But we're back to that again. And it was like that for
Were there
quite a
any
while.
like, so you're in the texting phase constantly. Were there any progressions up that value ladder up to phone calls? I mean, you had gone to in person. So, I mean, I don't know if I'd classify the meeting the parents as a romantic type of a date, but was there any like sprinkling in of like talking, or is he just strictly text message?
Strictly text message, but that's because that's
Okay,
kind of relationship hit. He did call me on my birthday.
interesting.
That was, which he doesn't. He's not a phone call person, so that was interesting. Um, but we were talking more, so now it wasn't that awkwardness. Like I could text him and it wouldn't be weird, and I could message, but it wasn't that same kind of when we were dating, talk about everything daily kind of thing. I still had to respect the mirroring and the
Yeah,
rules of the text messages.
sometimes even like you, because if you really think about it, you go back to the beginning of your relationship, everything's so new. You can talk, you're learning. Sometimes that can shoot you in the foot because then you run out of things to talk about and things to keep interesting, you know, especially when you're going through a breakup like this. Like they feel like they already know everything about you.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, and I didn't talk about this before, but when I did try to speed up the text messaging, because I'm only human, I did try to make that happen a few times. It backfired, and that's when I would get kind of him getting less closing up, when he'd close up or not respond as much. And that was when I would try to speed up the process and get too personal, or try to hit him up every day. It never worked.
Okay.
It always backfired.
So something's got to give here. You've been through, you said your birthday's a little after Christmas. So you've been
Yeah,
through the Christmas thing. He
yeah.
pulls back and then the birthday thing happens. What happens here? Something's got to turn it.
So he got deployed again.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Another
think I
6
mentioned that
months.
before. I didn't mention that in the Facebook group, but he got deployed again is what happened. Just a mini one, but he got
Okay.
deployed again. And we were having, but this time we were talking. Well, like I was doing the text messaging thing, but this time I was communicating with him as opposed to the no contact last time. And honestly, I just think at this point with the text messaging with the text messaging and the respecting his boundaries and doing the mirroring, it gave him the time he needed to process what he wanted to do, and the proof that I wasn't pressuring him. And I think that's what I needed to be doing the whole time, which is the whole point of this program. At no point was I pressuring him, but I was showing him how good it could be. But at the same time, I'm going to let you figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that's what finally got into his head. I missed this. She's not pressuring me. It's right there. And then we went away again. He really missed it. And it was while he was away, that's when he just said it one day in a message. He's like, yeah, when we get back together, so when I get back home, we're gonna do this and this, and we're gonna go, do this, and let's
Future
go on this
pace.
vacation,
Right.
future
Okay.
base. And it literally was a day. He just started using future terms and he never went back.
So was it like a very, was there ever like a talk? Because sometimes people make a huge deal about the talk, you know, like did that ever happen for him? Was he a little too afraid to take that step? So it just almost naturally unfolded to the point where you're just back together.
It naturally unfolded, and I let it. I purposely didn't have the talk
Okay.
because from
You
everything I'd
figured,
seen with
and
him,
I think you figured correctly. That that would push them. That's like, you know, there's that emotional thing, then there's the physical thing. That is up there, you know, like
Yeah.
putting a
Yeah.
commitment on it. And you've been together for a while now because you posted that
Yeah.
success story in June, I think.
Yeah, and it's actually Anna gave the inspiration not to confront him. She never told me not to, but she told me her story and how she had just after she just kind of naturally migrated back together.
Mhm.
And then after so many months, she was like, "Oh, here's my boyfriend," and he didn't correct her. And basically that's what happened with us. I did this. I did it specifically because I remembered her story, and it worked.
That's actually what happened with my wife.
Oh,
I've got a very similar story, which is we were out at some sort of some bar that had a band playing. It was like during July 4th, and she was wearing like an outfit um that had like the American flag on it. And they called her up because they wanted her to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know, it's kind of this dumb bar thing. But the guy asked my permission first. He said, "Hey, we were just dating at the time. Is it okay if I ask for your girlfriend to come up on stage?" And I go, "Sure." That's how it went. So sometimes letting it unfold naturally is kind of beautiful if you get cool stories like that.
well, at this point, I knew him well enough, and it did take this process for me to
It did.
learn
Yeah.
it. Truly, I didn't know before that I couldn't push this. It had to be, he had to make that decision, and he did. And again, once he was in, he was all in. So that was good. But definitely, I don't think that conversation would have worked well for him.
So for you, I think the key really was understanding that fearful attachment, but most
Yeah,
importantly, like when they pull back, you need to kind of pull back.
yeah.
So to me, that requires an immense amount of discipline. What would you say to someone who, because to me, there's also a huge difference between understanding and doing. A lot of people understand, a lot of people don't do. So how did you sort of reconcile the two?
Well, I did have my moments of doubt. Like I'm not going to say that I didn't, but I would say for the most part, I had to console myself saying, I really truly think this can work out, and I have to stick with this. And I remember thinking several times, I think I told this to Anna, is that I can go through a year. I told this in the very, I can go through a year if I know it's going to work out. What I don't want to do is go through a year to find out it's not going to work out. So because I had this belief that I truly think it could work out, I kept at it. And like I said, it wasn't until that December conversation I had with her where both of us, it wasn't just her, I thought, oh my God, this might not work. And it's funny
Uh,
because that was the last big hurdle before he's like, yeah, we're back together. But
yeah,
it was like he really had to pull back hard to make that final decision.
I'd say in Anna's defense, she's used to getting results a lot quicker. Your guy was a tough one.
It was.
Like usually it's the emotional thing and they're more than okay with the physical barrier getting breached, but I guess for him he was really uptight about that, which is a kind of a beautiful thing because it really goes to show how much he does care about relationships, especially if he's all in. How have
Yeah.
things been since you've been back together?
It's been amazing. It's yeah, he's over all the time. And so actually I didn't mention this, but I have a dog. And actually that was one of the first things I mentioned this in the story. That's the first way I kind of knew that he was missing me for like how I started. Actually, it's one of the ways that I kept my hope alive was he would say, I miss the dog and give him a cuddle for me. And I miss him and I can't wait to see him again. And
That's
I
kind of a
realized
clever inception like way of putting it in there, like I
uh,
miss you.
exactly. And I realized that even when he said it the first time, I was like, no, you don't, you miss me. And I realized that, so that when he would say I miss the dog, that's what would give me hope that no, it's actually me he misses. But anyways, we are back together, and he does joke about, he still kind of jokes about that with the dog. So when he goes away now, he'll be like, oh yeah, I really miss the dog. I mean, you're fine, but I miss the dog. So I think he kind of knows that he was doing that now.
Yeah. Well, maybe, maybe this is an aspect that you didn't think about, but maybe that was like his subtle hint.
Oh,
Because
maybe.
I kind of get the sense that he's a little too afraid to make the first move. And the only reason I say that is because men who aren't afraid to make the first move are usually the ones that breach that ask question, like, hey, are we going to be boyfriend and girlfriend again? But he kind of just let it unfold naturally. You were smart to let it unfold naturally because now look at you. You're just like this ultimate awesome situation. But I'm just wondering if like maybe a lot of this is because of a lack of communication on his part on what he needs. Because I think fearful avoidance are really afraid to tell you what they really need.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, me not being a fearful avoidant, I didn't understand that. And I 100% believe I needed this process to understand him better. I really do understand him better than I did before. And knowing, and even now, there's been a
That's
few
gonna,
times where
I
he's
mean,
pulled
that's gonna
back a
be,
little bit. Sorry.
no, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just gonna say that's huge, because if you really think about it, like he's, instead of thinking this girl is like crowding my space, he's gonna think this girl knows exactly when I need space. And that shift gives you advantage over every other woman he could possibly meet. Don't tell him I said that.
But yeah, so no, exactly it. And that's what I was just saying. So even though we're back together and I'm not doing any texting phase with him, there's a few times where he was really stressed and I could sense it because now I recognize it. And I just gave him the space. And then after a day or two, he's like, oh, blah, 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 back to normal. And so I now know he needs that. He needs sometimes just to be in himself and not have me nagging him. What's the term you use?
I would say Nat, but I would
Nat.
say, I would say, I don't, to me, I don't look at it like you nagging him or natting him. I mean, maybe that's how he looks at it, but I look at you like you want to fix the problem, right? Because that will make him feel better. Is that the intent behind why you would sort of push too much in the past?
Well, because I wanted to help.
Yeah,
If he's sad or stressed, I feel like, oh, what can I do to help? This will help. This
I
not
can be the
helping.
hero here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. I'm blown away. This is so, a lot of insights that I learned personally from this. Probably the number one thing is the compartmentalization aspect of the military thing. I'd actually never heard that before, and it makes so much sense now that I think about it. Where they get deployed, they kind of compartmentalize, so the no contact rule may not be as effective. I mean, there's not really much you can do, but I think the what you probably did for yourself during the no contact rule was an essential part of the process. Like even just understanding how attachment styles work and diagnosing him as like, he sounds like a fearful avoidant. Here's how you handle that when he gets back, but also the texting phase and how that kind of, if you got a fearful avoidant, you're just gonna, it's going to take some time, you know?
Yeah.
What would you
Yeah.
say looking back was the most important thing for you?
um, that I did for myself personally, or to get back with him, like that.
Let's go both.
Okay. For me personally, um, I think, I actually mentioned this before. I didn't mention it during the podcast, but I needed to get that confidence back and that bring back that dynamic of where I wasn't being meek and trying to make him happy and scared he's going to leave, but
Mhm.
actually be a partner where we have that banter. And if
Well, it's equal.
yeah, exactly. Very equal. And I truly needed that back in the relationship, for it to work. And he knew that. And now that that's back, we're both so comfortable. So I needed to get my confidence back up so we could have that feeling of quality back in relationship, which he wants too. He didn't like it when I was meek, so this was really good. So that just, I can't tell you how much I needed that. And then I think the most important thing for the relationship was what we just discussed, was me learning that he does need to process things a little bit differently than I do. And that's fine. As long as I can recognize it, I am more than willing to give him that time.
Yeah, I think that both of those things are so essential. I think especially because we didn't really touch on it too much in the podcast, but basically what she was talking about is how she found herself in the relationship the first time, almost afraid she was going to lose him, to the point where she starts trying to please him and everything becomes about him. She kind of loses herself a little bit, and then you go through the breakup, you kind of realize like, oh my God, I was doing that.
Yeah.
And now you don't do that anymore.
No. No. And
Well,
it's yeah, I feel
Heather,
happier too.
I am really, this is a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on. I really, I just am super grateful that you took the time out of your day to do this.
Yeah, no problem. I'm so excited that I got to the point where I can do a podcast and talk about this. And we're both very happy now. So, and I do owe it to the program. I'm not just saying that to, buy his program, although you should buy his program.
There you
But
go.
it definitely, without question, I would not have gotten him back had I not gone through that, for sure.
Well, thank you. You can just continue the compliments. We should also praise Coach Anna, because I think Coach Anna helped a ton. So
She was amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
there you go. buy the program, get Coach Anna, you should be good.